In this video, we're going to cover the options available in the Clients menu, including creating a new client and starting a scan. To start, I'll come up here and select the Clients tab. This is where you can create new clients and then start scanning any of the clients you've added from there. Before I get into that though, let's talk about the Export Clients button. The Export Clients option is a nice feature because you can export the names and emails of clients you've scanned. You can export your entire client list, but you also have the option to export clients from a certain time frame. So, say you went to an expo and you had the booth there and you were running scans. You can just come in and export anybody that you actually scanned for that time period. So say it was last Friday through a Sunday. You can come in here and choose just that time frame and click export, and it will export that to an Excel file. And now you can easily use that list to email them to follow up. The next thing here, before we create a client, is that you can also use the Session History tab, which is helpful to see who you've scanned in a particular time period. We can go through a month, we can go through a week, or we can go through a day and see who was scanned or what our volume was like for a particular period. Okay, now let's talk about the My Clients tab. Before we dive into creating a new client, I'll just mention here that you do have the option to archive clients, and you can do this by selecting the Archive Manager button. From here, you can select any clients you want to archive. You'd need to search for them here, and then select the box next to them and select Save. Now this won't delete the client completely, as you can always come back to this list and unarchive them. But it does remove them from your list, so they're basically out of sight, out of mind. All right, let's click Cancel here to get back to the main client list. Another thing that's important to mention is that oftentimes we see people creating the same client multiple times. And to avoid that, if you're not completely sure whether you've already added a client or not, you can come up to the search bar here and type in their name. That will save you a lot of headaches later on, so you don't have different profiles for the same name. And obviously, this is where you would go to search for an existing client that you're scanning as well. All right, after we've checked that the new client isn't already in the system, now we can select the New Client button here. Now, when you create a new client, it's going to pull up a disclaimer. This just explains that ZYTO technology is not diagnostic. It's not used to treat, prevent, or mitigate any disease. Just some legal clarification there of what ZYTO is and what it's used for. I'll select Continue here. And now we come to the screen where you enter the client's information. The first name, last name, and gender are the only required fields, but it's good to get their phone number and email also, especially the email, so you can easily email them their report. The birthday doesn't necessarily need to be entered unless the person is 16 or younger, because in that case, the scan may exclude some products that are only made for adults. But otherwise, you can choose whether to add it or not. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's easier to work with a test client and not scan yourself or someone else when you're learning to use the software at first. If you're just trying to learn the software, you can create a test client and put their name as test and their last name as the gender you select, so male or female. Then you can go to the hand cradle settings and put in simulated mode so you can quickly learn how to run a scan with that test client. That way, you can keep all your scan tests separate from the actual scans. Okay, now after we have the information entered on this screen, we just select Save and the new client is created. And it takes us to this client screen. You'll notice that you have the option here to add notes about the client. So you might want to add things like health issues, recommendations, and so on. You can also add the next appointment date, which will show up on their scan report. Notice here that there's also the option to archive the client. This is just another way you can archive a client. When you're all ready to run a scan, you can select this New Client Session button, and now you'll see the scanning options available to you. Okay, that covers the My Client settings. In the next video, we'll dive into how to run a remote session.